Hello everyone, it's Brandon here again for another video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something new, and I'm going to be giving a story from when I was manic. And I'm thinking about making this a series. We'll see how the first episode goes and if you guys like it. But without any further ado, let's get started. So, you've seen the title, and this is a story about becoming God. So I have been meditating, taking psychedelics, reading different spiritual texts, doing a lot of things to try to achieve quote-unquote enlightenment. And I had a very real and really significant experience a few months ago. And this is, on one level, what I would term God consciousness. It's talked about in many different forms of spirituality. There's this concept that a human being can, at least for a certain state of time, or maybe indefinitely, experience a heightened state of consciousness that is similar to being in a state of consciousness as the kind of spiritual object that all religions are trying to get to. Anyway, also, part of this that you have to remember and keep in mind is that I was in a manic episode at this state in time too. So there are certain delusions that come into it, but I would say it was both a spiritually significant and real experience and also a delusional kind of mental health situation too. These two things were happening at the same time. And this is actually something that happens for many people in manic episodes, is they feel some type of connection to spirituality or religion. And I would say that a lot of that connection is genuine, but it gets kind of corroded and reduced by their delusions that they're having at the time too. But anyway, this is just a story, so let's get into it. So, I had been manic for about 2 weeks, I think, around the time this story is happening. This was last fall, and I had plans to go on a hike with my dad and one of my good friends. And we were going to a hike. It was about a 3-hour drive away. And so I woke up early in the morning, walked outside of my house after I got ready, and I was deeply in the present moment. I don't know how much spirituality you guys are into these days, watching my videos, but being in the present moment is something that a lot of spirituality kind of hinges upon nowadays. And I was definitely experiencing things presently, not having many thoughts when I was doing things like that walk up and down my street before I left for the hiking trip. But anyway, so my dad and friend are in the car, and they pick me up, and we drive a few hours down south to an old growth forest. But on the drive, nothing really too significant happened. I wasn't really that involved in listening to the music or anything. I think I might have even brought my own headphones. I forget. But yeah, so basically we do a drive. It's a few hours, and we get to our destination, and we get out, and it looks like, a normal park. There are very big trees. The weather's pretty good. It's maybe 50 or 60 degrees. I'm wearing a jacket, normal clothes. And we basically get to it. We start hiking. Now, something to be noted is that because I was manic, I was kind of hyperverbal, or, just talking a lot, typically, or more than normal. And in this situation, as soon as we started hiking, I stopped really talking that much. And I would say that it was because I was feeling a connection to nature at this point. And the more that we started hiking, my mania was kind of manifesting. Like, you could see there were differences. One example is my dad and my friend were talking about, you know, this ledge where they're like, oh man, you know, I wonder what it looks like over there, you know, if you looked over that ledge. But they were like scared to do it because, you know, they're in normal states of mind. They're not manic. They're thinking, you know, oh, it's dangerous to go up to that ledge. Me, in a manic state of mind, I thought, you know, I know my footing will be fine. I'm going to go walk up to the ledge and look over. And they think it's a little, you know, funny that I do that. They think it's a little risky. I think it's not really risky at all. So I look over the ledge and, you know, it was interesting, cool thing to look at. We keep walking, and slowly I began feeling a very real sensation kind of in the center of my skull, you know, basically the center of my brain, you know, back here in the middle of my head. And I actually like hear it. It sounded like something was seeping out of a part of my brain. And a hypothesis I have for what this was possibly the pineal gland. So the pineal gland in some cultures was known as the third eye. I learned recently that it actually has photoreceptors in it. So the same or similar receptors to your normal eyes. So it's interesting that cultures other than our own knew that for thousands of years, that and that they called it a third eye. But anyway, there's a theory these days that the world's most potent psychedelic drug, known as dimethyltryptamine, or short for DMT, there's the thought that DMT can be produced in the pineal gland and released in the pineal gland. So I really did feel and even hear something going on in the center of my skull, right around where that would be. So that's my explanation for it, and I think that's my explanation for kind of the spiritual experience that I had this day, maybe where it scientifically came from. So anyway, we keep walking, and there are other people around. We actually walk around, you know, the face of a small like cave or like kind of shelter away from the elements where, you know, it's all just rock. It's like an overhang of a cliff. And we're there, and, you know, we're making, you know, my dad and friend were making noises like yelling like, oh, and you could hear it like echo. And I partook in this a little bit too. I was really starting to just feel connected to nature at this point, and was really quieting down, losing that hyperverbal kind of feeling that I had, you know, most of the time that I'm manic. And anyway, so we keep walking, and we walked overall for probably like 3 hours. But this sensation in the middle of my head began to get more intense, that like seeping, or, you know, where it feels like something's being released. And I just became more and more kind of dissolved in the present moment. I really wasn't having hardly any thoughts at all, and I was just walking and experiencing it fully, and everything was so beautiful and vivid at this point. So then I started to feel sensations around here. So I don't know if you guys have heard of the chakra system, but basically one way that I would describe the experiences that I was having this day is I was having 6th and 7th chakra openings of those chakras. Typically they aren't really open in people, you know, that you would normally run into. It's not something you have in your everyday life. And I had a very real experience at one point, the thought that, you know, it was kind of like a brief thought, because again, I wasn't really thinking that much at this point in time. My mind was very calm, but I had the idea that, you know, this must be what it feels like to be an enlightened monk. just very, very attuned to the present moment, not having any distractions, just doing the one thing you're doing, and just feeling a lot of beauty in the most mundane things, like walking in a forest, which is still pretty cool because of the big trees and rocks, and it was interesting, but still, there's a certain thing that comes with a spiritual experience to where even boring things seem like the most beautiful thing you could have ever imagined. And there was one point where I really started to really just get deeper into this experience. And I was having those sensations happen in my head. And I was looking at a group of people, and some of the people were actually girls, like high school age. And I was looking at these people as, and the best way I could describe it is as if I had created them. As if, me understanding from a spiritual standpoint that we are only consciousness. Consciousness is in everything, every experience. There's no experience separate from consciousness at a certain extent, from an epistemological background and way of looking at things. So I was kind of thinking about that because this is a spiritual thing that I have understood through a lot of different traditions, but primarily the Hindu and Vedanta traditions have this idea of Brahman, that basically all things are consciousness, all things are Brahman, or at least that is kind of like the foundation for everything. So anyway, I probably lost some of you guys there, but I was looking at these people in front of me, and I was just seeing like the beauty of their existence. Just seeing them in, like, it's almost like the way that a father would look at his daughter as being beautiful. It wasn't like a sexual or erotic thing, but I was just deeply appreciating the beauty of these people, and just thinking consciousness created this everything is consciousness, and I am one manifestation of consciousness, and these people are in front of me, and there's so much beauty and intricacy that is in them. And my dad actually looked at me, and he saw the way that I was looking at them, and he thought that it was like I was looking at them in some kind of a sexual way, which he just didn't understand, like what was happening then. And I would say that was the experience of God consciousness. Like, that moment really kind of culminated in it all. And I was just in such a blissful state of consciousness. It was incredible. Something that I really can't ever express in words. I can remember what it was like a little bit, but I'm missing so much of the kind of gravity and the beauty that was in that. So anyway, after that, I walked around. I remember I picked up an animal bone, and I felt like, somehow maybe this will connect me to some type of energy. And it did seem to bring me even more into the present moment. I remember at one point I touched a rock and felt like I was in some type of a communication of energy with that rock. This was a giant boulder, probably hundreds of millions of years old. And I was just touching it. I remember touching trees and feeling that I could somehow, transmit some type of energy or communication by touching the trees. Which is something, it sounds incredibly crazy to us in a westernized modern culture. But, with that background, but there are many cultures where the thought that you could communicate with animals, trees, spirits, whatever, that was like a foundational part of their culture. So, are we right in that we can't, with our westernized way of looking at it? Or, were these other cultures onto something? That's a thought that comes to me. Were they onto something? Because I did seem to experience something that day. But anyway, so after that, we hiked around, and I had a sense that I was no longer just Brandon Rohe, the one, myself. I had more of a sense that, I was just as much, or maybe a little bit more so, Brandon Rohe, but I was also the people in the group. And I began kind of having this experience of a group consciousness, as like there was not as much separation as you feel normally between you and another person and what's going on. So like I myself was quiet, but there was a point in time when we got lost, and they were pulled out the map, and they're like, Brandon, can you help us find it? And then, I started looking at it. But basically, like, the actions that my dad and my friend were doing, I felt were just as much a part of this Brahman consciousness that I was. So, there was that loss of the importance of myself above others because I'm experiencing life through myself. That kind of dissolved away, and I was experiencing things as a group and having that hike as a group rather than as an individual person as much as normal. Anyway, so we go back to the car, and we're done with the hike. It's about a 3-hour drive back home. And on the drive back home, I began to have a little bit of hallucinations. Like, I remember, even more than a hallucination, it was more of a delusion that so one of my favorite people on YouTube is Leo Gura, the creator of actualize.org. I've talked about him before in some of my videos, and cited his videos as references at times. And I saw he talked about a movie in one of his videos, and it was a James Bond movie. So I started thinking about that, and I was going through the list of James Bond movies, and I saw that one was called From Russia with Love. And I had in mind that Leo Gura was Russian born, and I thought that in this moment I had the experience that and it really felt true and real at the time, that that movie was created solely for the entitled that solely for the purpose of defining him and I's connection, like our connection. I ended up purchasing that movie on Amazon and watched a little bit of it. And then I had the idea that I was going to donate to Leo on Patreon, because he had just started a Patreon like a month before. And I had already donated some money to him while I was manic, I think $100 or so. But I thought it would be a great idea, and it would really stand out if I donated the number of pi to him, like 3.14. I donated $3,141.15, I believe was the pi number. While I was manic, I thought it was a great idea. And this is the part of the story where I'd like to say, a lot of great things come, great experiences can come possibly for some people in manic episodes, some really beautiful euphorias. But also there are a lot of downsides to your daily life, and this is one of them. I actually luckily was able to cancel that donation on my credit card. I was able to cancel the card, and I had to report the transaction as a fraudulent charge in order to stop it. And I had to do that. Once I wasn't manic, I was like, oh shit, I just donated basically all of my savings that I had at the time. And money's going to be real tight here if I don't cancel this. And yeah, that's why I would like to say, you know, be careful there if you're in a manic episode. It's something that's easy to say and very hard to do, to be careful of things while you're in a manic episode. But that pretty much, that was the main thing that happened on that drive that was of significance. I hope that you guys enjoyed the story. I don't know if I'm a great storyteller or not. I'm sure I have a lot of room to grow. I didn't have too many details in there. But otherwise, I'm going to get off here for this video, and I will see you guys in another video next week. Thanks for watching.